For all things ATL. For everything Falcons. First to the end zone, touchdown. This is Peachtree Football. Now, your hosts, Dylan Mathews and Beau Morgan.
What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Dylan Mathews alongside the man, the myth, the legend himself, Beau Morgan. And you see him, another man, another myth, another legend in Ross Tucker, former NFL player, now host of the Ross Tucker pod as well, Audacy NFL Insider, CBS Sports, Westwood One. I mean, the guy does all things NFL. Wherever you see NFL, Ross Tucker is a part of it. So, Ross, first and foremost, thank you so much for the time today. And I mean, how you feeling, man? We got training camp going on. The NFL is that much closer. I mean, are you finally being able to scratch that itch a little bit?
Yeah, man, I'm loving it. It's hard to believe. Thursday night, there's a game already. Right. I was checking it out, by the way. It's like $350 to get to the Jets-Browns Hall of Fame game. It makes sense, I guess. The Jets have two guys going in the Hall of Fame for the first time in a while, and Joe Klecko and Darrelle Revis. And then the Browns are in it, and the Browns are right there. Those people are all Browns fans. So I guess it makes some sense. Just very interesting to see. I was doing a read for a sponsor of mine, and I was like, what? This can't be right. And I kept checking it, and it is. Like $350 is like the cheapest ticket right now.
Ross, have you ever done that game before? Because I did that game because I produced for Falcons Radio, and when you go into that place with a team, I mean, we literally walked through a high school. I'm with like 90 NFL players walking through a high school schoolroom.
I've never done the game. I've never been at the game. I was there last year, the day after the game. I was actually filling in. This sounds like a name drop. I was filling in for Jim Rome from that stadium on Friday, but I was only there because Tony Baselli invited me for his induction ceremony. So I didn't go for the Thursday night game. The game's Thursday night now. I just went there for all the Hall of Fame festivities to support Tony and to drink and have a good time, basically.
I love it. Well, Ross, again, we appreciate you hopping on Peachtree Football. And it is called Peachtree Football because we focus on all things Atlanta Falcons. So let's go ahead and get into the Atlanta Falcons talking. Ross, I'm going to go ahead and ask you what the people are dying to know, what you think. Can Desmond Ridder lead the Falcons to an NFC South Division championship as QB1? Can he do it? Does he have the tools? Is he good enough to be the Falcons franchise QB and lead them to a division title this year?
Yeah, so I think the answer is yes. And I think right now the Falcons and the Saints are probably co-favorites in that division, but I would give the edge to the Saints just because I feel more comfortable with Derek Carr and what I've seen him do. I guess I look at the Falcons last year, and this is kind of how I look at it, right? They won 7 games last year.
Right.
It's not like Mariota was lighting the world on fire. Okay. They lost Kyle Pitts to an injury. They didn't have Bijan. So Ritter's not going to play worse than how Mariota and Ridder played last year, right? He's not going to be worse.
Right.
And then defensively, I mean, I remember watching the Falcons play defensively last year, and that might have been the least amount of starters that I could name on a defense in the NFL in a long time. I mean, it was like Grady Jarrett, AJ Terrell. Was Deion Jones still there? Like Deion, I mean, he wasn't even it's unbelievable. Like, whereas this year they bring in Calais Campbell, you got Bud Dupree. You know, I knew Anderson last year because I did the FCS championship game. I like him, Troy Anderson. But now you bring in Jesse Bates. I mean, and Okudah, we'll see what he does. We'll see what some of these guys do. You bring in some of these guys from the Saints like Caden Ellis, Onyemata. I mean, they should have a much better defense. They have much better players. And so to win 7 games the last 2 years like they did, I don't see how they don't win 8, 9, or 10 this year, which probably puts them right there to win the division. So, yes, he can. I don't know, man. The reports don't seem all that favorable when you hear what they're saying about Ritter at camp, or even if you watch him last year, man, some of the throws that he made, it was a little bit like, ugh. But he was a rookie, and you're hoping that this year he can take another step forward.
Well, and in that, because I want to stay on Ritter for a second off what you just said, there were also some throws that he made. There was a throw against Baltimore that was like, wow, I didn't think Desmond Ritter could make that throw because he's backpedaling, kind of sidearms it to Drake London across the field. Do you think if Drake London had a 1 or a 2 next to that round that he was drafted in instead of a 3, that it would be a little bit more people would favor him more and he would get less criticism, and the team would get less criticism for going with him to start the season instead of going after Lamar or moving up in the draft to get a starting quarterback?
Well, there's no question that your draft status stays with you really forever, right? I mean, really, I experienced that as an undrafted free agent. I mean, it cracks me up when these guys stink as rookies, as first-round picks, but they keep them in there, and then the next year they're pretty. Andrew Thomas, the former Georgia Bulldog offensive tackle for the Giants, is a good example of that. If you're not a first or second-round pick, you don't even get that chance to play again if you stunk the whole year. You know what I mean? You don't even get that opportunity. So it does stay with you. I don't know what they'd be saying about. I mean, I think that the expectations would be higher. The hope would be he would get more of the benefit of the doubt if Ritter was a first-round pick. Yeah. I think because he wasn't, I think if he struggles early in the year, you'll hear people calling for Heineke pretty early, definitely earlier than they would have if Ritter was a first-round pick. Just the way it works. It's nobody's fault. It just is.
Ross, I want to get your take on this because you talked about all the offseason additions the Falcons have made on the defensive side of the football as well. And we obviously have talked about Desmond Ritter. We'll get into Bijan, but they've made some strides offensively as well, adding Bijan Robinson. Obviously, they're going to get Kyle Pitts back. They traded for Jonnu Smith. They signed Matt Collins and Scotty Mill on the offensive end as well. They got Tyler Algier, who was a rookie running back last year, who rushed for over 1,000 yards in 16 games. I say all that to ask this. Which side of the ball do you think is going to be most improved this season? Is it going to be the defense with all the free agent acquisitions and all the money they spent on the defensive side of the football and free agency? Or is it going to be what they've kind of invested in the draft with Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and the other free agent acquisitions on the awesome side of the ball? So which side of the ball do you think is going to be more improved this year?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because I think they'll both be improved. I'm gonna go defense, just because I think they'll still be very run heavy offensively. I think they'll be more explosive with Bijan Robinson. I mean, they're telling us they're going to be more run heavy, right? Like, we don't need to guess. They drafted a running back 8 overall and a run blocking guard. We played tackle at Syracuse, but he's going to be run blocking. I love the way he plays, by the way, in the second round. There's no question that they got those guys to run the ball more. So I guess I just don't know, Dylan, that we'll notice a huge jump forward offensively. I mean, I think the numbers will be better. I think they'll put more points up, but I don't think it's going to be like Air Falcons, right? I don't think they're going to be throwing enough that we see them putting up really big numbers.
Right.
Whereas defensively, I mean, what did they add? 5 starters, 6 starters? I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a team add that many starters on one side of the ball before.
Right.
Now, the odds are they won't all pan out, but I would think they make a pretty big leap defensively.
Let's talk about stay on the defense for a second, because to me, the one signing that's kind of gone seemingly under the radar is David Onyemata. The guy is a big dude, plays in the middle, and now Grady Jarrett really has some help inside to help him. So how much do you think bringing in a guy like Onyemata is going to free up Grady Jarrett to become even more, because Grady Jarrett's one of the best defensive linemen. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased, Ross, but I think he's one of the better interior defensive linemen in the NFL. But he's been doing it by himself for years.
He's an unbelievable player. I mean, he's an unbelievable football player. He has not had sort of a partner in crime inside there. He has not had a guy that you probably need to double team in the run game in Onyemata. I love that addition by the Saints, and by the Falcons from the Saints. I hope, and by the way, I think Calais Campbell helps in that regard as well, and I think Bud Dupree helps in that way. You know, I can only imagine what it's been like the last couple of years. I'm a former offensive lineman, right? I can only imagine what it's been like in the offensive line room the last couple of years when you're playing the Falcons. All right, guys, we gotta make sure we know where Grady Jarrett is, and then we also need to double team Grady Jarrett, and then we can't let Grady Jarrett beat us. I mean, they didn't really have other guys that concerned you all that much. So I'm hoping he's able to get some one-on-ones. Really one of the reasons why I hope the Falcons are good and they make the playoffs is because I would like if more people knew how good Grady Jarrett was. One of my pet peeves as a guy that played 7 years is when a guy is on bad teams and he's killing people, and people don't recognize it nationally that much because they don't play that many nationally televised games.
Ross, sticking with the defensive side of the football for a little bit longer here, you know, you talked about David Onyemata as kind of the acquisition that's flown under the radar. Let's talk about the one that kind of made a big splash, and probably the Falcons' biggest splash. That's Jessie Bates. Let's talk about how much he's going to really upgrade that backfield, because we know about AJ Terrell, right? And we obviously have to wait and see on Jeff Okudah, but he's going to help out a young safety and Richie Grant. And I mean, honestly, how he's going to upgrade the back end, it's probably going to help the front end of the defensive line as well, because obviously the back end scratches the back of the defensive line can scratch the back of the back end as well. So just for a moment, Jessie Bates, how much of an impact do you think he's going to make to that Falcons secondary?
Yeah, I mean, he's a really good player. Really good player. I know the Bengals were very upset to lose him. They kind of knew that was coming and that he would get the money that he got. But, man, there's a lot that could go into this. Number one, just him as a player, right? You know, the ground he's able to cover on the back end, how sure of a tackler he is, but he can do a lot of different things, which is really helpful to a first-time D coordinator like Ryan Nielsen to be able to have a guy like Bates who's that versatile really helps. I also just wonder how much he helps the other guys in the back end. I mean, you're talking about a very smart guy, very accomplished guy who his football intelligence is off the charts. I just wonder in the meeting rooms, you know, pre-snap, you know, how much he's able to help these other guys on the back end, the linebackers, to make sure that they're in a position to succeed. He was just coached very well by Lou Anarumo in Cincinnati. I think the Bates addition's huge.
One of the things I wanted to get your take on, being a former offensive lineman. Now, I know you never, to my knowledge, you never played tackle in the NFL. I'm not sure about college, but I know you were a guard and a center, so you moved around. Matthew Bergeron was a very good player at Syracuse playing at tackle, but now he's trying to make that transition inside. What is that jump like? Because a lot of people say that when you're playing guard, the game comes at you a little bit quicker off the snap.
No question, Beau. And I one of my kind of claims to fame is I played all 5 in NFL preseason or regular season games. Now, I don't think I never started a game at tackle. You know, that was more preseason or like emergency. I started at least 5 games at center and both guards. The key to that, by the way, is you can't really be good at any of them. Otherwise, they would have just left me there. but I have seen, so we all have the examples of like Joel Bitonio and Zach Martin and these guys, Brendan Sheriff, who maybe didn't have the ideal arm length. So they went from tackle to guard and they became fantastic guards, right? I would also tell you twice in my career, I was with guys that they tried that with, and it was a disaster. So in 2002 in Washington, they took Rod Jones, who had played left tackle for the Super Bowl Rams, put him at guard. Didn't work. In 2007, I was back in Washington. They took longtime Dolphins right tackle Todd Wade, put him at guard. Didn't work. You know, I think it's a little bit easier maybe going from college to the NFL as opposed to long-time tackle in the NFL, and then you switch. It's kind of like a young pup. You can mold them and teach them, where it's tougher to teach an old dog new tricks. But to your point, Beau, things happen much faster inside. You know, when you're a tackle in pass protection, okay, there's kind of a timing with it. You know, it's like kick, engage, kick, punch. There's a rhythm to it. At guard, first of all, they are right on you. They are right on you right now. Secondly, you're not going against a 6'5", 250-pound lean dude. You're going against Grady Jarrett. You're going against a 6 foot, 6'1", 300-pound ball of butcher knives that is just coming up the field right at you, and you can't get any leverage on them because they're this low off the ground. And then the real issue I've seen for them sometimes, Beau, is at tackle, you're primarily blocking the edge rusher, right? At guard, you're tied into the protection with all the blitzes and the linebackers and all the stunts and twists that happen right now. And if you can't process real quick, like boom, 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 you're going to struggle. You are going to struggle if you can't process. So my guess is they already probably have a little bit of a feel for if this is going to be a short-term thing where Bergeron just gets it versus, oh boy, like we got to really do some work here.
Hey, do you think, real quick, I know we got close to wrapping up. Do you think that's why guards are starting to get paid much better? I mean, Chris Lindstrom's just trying a huge deal because it's just so it's becoming where the interior seems to be so important these days.
Yeah, I just looked at it again the other day how much Chris Lindstrom makes. He makes more per year than I made. He makes 5 times more annually than what I made for my entire 7-year career.
Well, you would have been getting that money if you were in the NFL now, Ross.
No, I wouldn't have, unfortunately.
You would have been getting that.
I wasn't as good as Chris Lindstrom. So I don't think we're allowed to swear on this, but if we are, hey, Chris. No, I'm just kidding. I'm happy for him. $20.5 million to play right guard. What a world. What a time to be alive. So the biggest thing with them paying interior guys is there's more and more good interior D-line rushers. Aaron Donald, Grady Jarrett. So you got to have guys like Lindstrom. But also, I think quarterbacks, especially the better ones, have gotten really good at stepping up in the pocket. You know, if you watch like some of these guys, like a Brady, the edge guy rarely affects him. He drops back and then he steps up and gets rid of it quick. So if you can keep the depth of the pocket, that is huge. And Bergeron's a banger, and Lindstrom's a banger, which is good because Dahlman's not the biggest kid at center. They can help keep the depth of the pocket for the quarterback, which is huge.
Ross, thank you so much for the time. This was Ross Tucker, former NFL player, 7-year vet. Also, like you said, one of the very few guys that played across all positions on the offensive line in his NFL career. That's versatility right there. And obviously, NFL Audacy Insider. Ross, thank you so much for the time today, man.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ross.
That was, again, Ross Tucker, again, 7-year NFL veteran, Audacy NFL Insider as well. Does a lot for the NFL. But, Beau, just to kind of react to Ross's thoughts here really quickly on the back end of this edition of Peachtree Football, I have to say one thing. Ross gave some very good insight, and I agree with mostly everything he said, but I do have to say this. Didn't necessarily agree with the Desmond Ridder take. I mean, I think, and it's not just Ross, it's been a lot of people. I think there have been way too many. I know he's reading reports too, so this, again, it goes to show it's not on Ross, but people I think have been putting out false information. Some people specifically at Falcons training camp and whatnot. But point being, people are making way too much of this Desmond Ridder thing at training camp, and him missing some throws and this, that, and the third. I mean, people, it seems like, are just finding every single little reason to criticize Desmond Ridder when they can. It's like when you give them an inch, they take a mile.
Well, I don't blame Ross. He's just he is only reporting what he has read, and right. that's just one of those deals. And just like we would react to, reacting to what Dak did in training camp yesterday or whatever, where he threw a bad pick. I saw Desmond Ridder throw a pick today, and I hear it talked about later on a show in Atlanta, and I watched the play, and the report I heard was, Arthur Smith was yelling at Desmond. Well, you know what I saw? I saw Desmond lighting up the receiver. So it looked like the receiver didn't run the route to the right depth. But if and honestly, the only reason I that was my takeaway was because I've worked with a quarterback for the last former quarterback for the last, 15 years in Dave Archer, who does Falcons radio, but also, and so he's going to talk to me about those things. But I saw Desmond get after the receiver immediately, and so that makes me think that that particular one was on the receiver because Desmond's not that kind of guy. But that's also what I want my quarterback to do. If you run the wrong route, how many times did we see Tom Brady get after a guy if he ran the wrong route, or Matt Ryan did it in his own way? So I don't blame Ross. I think that was all created by and it's crazy that one player, not even from Atlanta, never played in Atlanta, has no ties to Atlanta, has affected Atlanta. And I think that's what the Lamar Jackson effect. There became such a negative stigma about Desmond Ridder based on the fact that the Falcons didn't pursue a quarterback that for months that his own team didn't pay to the extent he wanted. So I don't blame I don't blame the Ross Tuckers of the world. The guys I blame are the reporters on the big media outlets who push the narrative. Yeah, and that's kind of where my issues lie. But it's just, look, it also is today was the second day of the team wearing pads, Dylan. And so when you put pads on, everything changes. When you're wearing shorts, you can kind of do more. The offensive line can do less. After talking with Mike Johnson, there's another guy who could play all 5 positions, much like Ross had talked about. So I'm kind of at a moratorium with it. I'm not going to worry about it until we're 4 to 5 games in the actual regular season, kind of like what Ross said, actually. So let's get through the preseason with kind of being unscathed with injuries and maybe see what we got. And now let's get 4 or 5, a quarter into the season, and let's see where we're at with Desmond Ridder.
Real quick, Beau, I do want to touch on one last thing before we wrap up here. Biggest takeaways so far. You've been at Atlanta Falcons training camp pretty much every day, besides just two days at the very start. But you've basically been at Atlanta Falcons training camp every single day that they've had practice thus far. Obviously, been out there with 92.9 The Game in the morning shift. What has been your biggest takeaway from Atlanta Falcons training camp so far? If you just had to give me one quick thing, what is there a big takeaway that you have?
The competitiveness. I know it's training camp and you can say that, but I've seen some true kind of alphas take over. You've got the Clark Phillips, Drake London thing to me is kind of camp in a nutshell so far, where you've got guys going after other guys. I've seen Bijan Robinson kind of be hateful to linebackers and DBs. And I think part of it is he's trying to establish and show everyone he's here. It's not the route running. The routes. Troy Anderson got the best of Bijan on Friday, I believe.
Yep.
Maybe it was Thursday. I think it was Thursday. And then I don't know, the days mixed together, Thursday or Friday. But then on Saturday, Bijan made a point to get the best of Troy. And then he got the best of Caden Ellis yesterday with this almost the exact same route, basically. But then I saw him play, he catches the ball, and obviously you're not tackling to the ground. You're wearing pads yesterday. And he's finishing the play, and instead of just running it out straight line and kind of running, running all the way to the end zone, he decides he's going to make a cut. And I'm trying to think of who it was. I don't think it was Richie Grant. It was I think it might have been Richie. I'm not sure. It was one of the DBs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it might have been Clark Phillips actually, but I know it wasn't. I think it was a veteran guy. And instead of just finishing up, he decides to cut back and kind of just basically show him up. And that created a slap. The DB decided he was going to slap Bijan as he did that. And Bijan turns around like, what are you doing?
Right.
And it was kind of hey, Rook, you're gonna show me up. I'm gonna let you know how I feel about it as you go by. And it's just Desmond Ridder yelling at the receiver for running on route. Like I said, go back to what created it was the whole Drake London play with Clark Phillips, and then Clark gets the interception. And Drake got his get back yesterday where he mossed him essentially. I saw Zach Harrison, who is one of the team's draft picks. I know this has gotten long-winded now.
Okay.
But one of the rookies.
I love it.
He flat out ran over, I believe it's Tyler Vrabel, who was Mike Vrabel's son. And that's a 6'7". That's two really big dudes going at each other. And he just ran flat over him. So the competitiveness early and the intensity, and I think that all starts with Arthur Smith. The intensity he had on day 2 of camp, where they're just going through things, I think that's all just kind of carried over to the players. And to me, that stood out to me, how intense this camp has been. And we're only, 5-6 days in. I'm
so happy you finished that off by saying it starts with Arthur Smith, because I couldn't agree more. Arthur Smith, his identity, he has his fun. I mean, there was a video on Atlanta Falcons Twitter today about D. Orlando Ledbetter. If you haven't heard, he got a fine for, not a real fine, but they had fun with the whole fine thing, and about him being late to a press conference. Actually, that was a real fine. It ended up being something that the AJC paid. Yeah, and Arthur Smith is matching it. He did say he was going to double it. Yeah, he's going to match it, and it's going to go to charity. I believe it's the National Civil Rights Museum or something along those lines that they've decided on. So that whole little fun thing turned into a great cause, a good cause for charity. Yeah. So that was the video that surfaced today on that the Falcons put up today on social media. So my point being is that Arthur Smith has his fun and where the timing is right, but he is also no nonsense, and that's the part I'm taking away, that I think this football team is really starting to take the identity of. Like, they'll have their fun, but they know when it's time to lock in and they know when it's go time, and they're going to be competitive. And like you said, all the showing up and stuff like that, guys are going to let guys are going to let no other guys about it. So I just really think this football team is taking on the identity of Arthur Smith, and that is a great thing for the Atlanta Falcons. So I'm glad you brought up the point at the end. But yeah, that's also, I have to say, that's probably my biggest takeaway, is how this team is really starting to take after the mold of Arthur Smith, and that's a really good thing. So we'll get more into Atlanta Falcons training camp next week, as we will be back and ready to talk even more Atlanta Falcons training camp. And hey, we got some football on Thursday as well, so we might even dive into the Hall of Fame game a little bit and the outrageous ticket prices that Ross told us about. So that's all coming up next week on the Peachtree Football Podcast. By the way, make sure you download, like Peachtree Football, subscribe to Peachtree Football as well. We are wherever you get your podcasts. That is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Audacy app, wherever you get your podcasts. Peachtree Football is there. Thank you so much again to Ross Tucker for joining us earlier in the episode. Had a great time chopping it up with him. Beau Morgan, thank you always as well. SquidBilly. And that's going to do it for this edition of Peachtree Football. For Beau Morgan, I'm Dylan Mathews. Again, like this podcast, download the podcast, subscribe to Peachtree Football wherever you get your podcast. And until we talk to you guys next week, peace.